Before you even speak, they've already decided who you are. Not based on your words, not on facts, but on something instant, something automatic. And if you've ever walked into a room and felt that shift, that subtle silence, that invisible distance, you already know what this feels like. No one says it out loud, but you feel it. The way they look at you, the way they don't fully engage. And the strange part is, it happens before you do anything. So the real question is, how can people judge you before you even give them a reason? At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your mind overreacting. But then it happens again and again. A conversation feels slightly off. A reaction feels delayed. Someone seems distant for no clear reason. And you start noticing patterns, because if it was random, it wouldn't repeat. But it does. And that's when something uncomfortable starts forming in your mind. What if people aren't reacting to what you say, but to what they already believe about you? And if that's true, then how long has this been happening without you noticing? So you start adjusting. You think more before speaking. You try to choose better words. You soften your tone. Maybe if you explain yourself clearly, they'll understand you better. But something strange happens. Even when you say the right thing, the reaction doesn't change much. It's like you're speaking into a version of yourself that already exists in their mind. And no matter what you say, and it gets filtered, twisted, reduced. And if you've ever felt like you're explaining yourself, but not being understood, you're not imagining it. Because the problem might not be your words, it might be what they decided before you even opened your mouth. And once someone creates that version of you, they don't look for truth. They look for confirmation. Every small thing you do becomes evidence. If you stay quiet, you're distant. If you talk too much, you're trying too hard. If you disagree, you're difficult. If you agree, you're weak. No matter what you do, it somehow fits the story they already built. And that's the trap. Because you're not being seen for who you are, you're being interpreted. And if you've ever felt like you can't win no matter what you do, this might be exactly why. But here's where it gets deeper. Because this doesn't start with you. People don't sit down and analyze who you are. Their brain takes shortcuts, fast judgments, patterns, past experiences. They see something familiar and instantly label it. And once that label is created, it sticks. Not because it's accurate, but because it's efficient. And if you've ever felt like people misunderstood you quickly, it's not always personal. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. Because even if the judgment isn't intentional, the impact still is. Because over time, you start adapting to it. You become more careful, more aware, more controlled. You stop saying certain things. You hold back parts of yourself. Not because you want to, but because you've learned how people react. And slowly, without realizing it, you're no longer just being yourself. You're managing perceptions. And if you've ever left a conversation feeling drained, like you were constantly adjusting, that's not random. That's what happens when you're trying to fit into a version of yourself that isn't even real. And the more you try to fix it, the worse it feels. Because now you're not just being judged. You're trying to control the judgment. You replay conversations in your head. You think about what you could have said differently, what you should have avoided, what they might have thought. And suddenly, it's not just about them anymore. It's inside your mind. And if you've ever caught yourself overthinking a simple interaction for hours, you've already felt how deep this can go. But the real problem isn't the thinking. It's what started it. Because the moment someone defines you, they stop trying to understand you. And the moment you feel that, you start trying to prove yourself. And that's where the cycle begins. They assume, you react. They interpret your reaction as confirmation, and it keeps going, until eventually, you're no longer responding naturally. You're reacting to their perception of you. And if you've ever felt like you're stuck in a loop you can't break, this is where it comes from. But this isn't even the hardest part. The hardest part is what it does to how you see yourself. Because after enough time, you start questioning your own identity. You wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too quiet, too intense, too distant, too much. And even if part of you knows that's not true, another part starts to believe it. And that internal conflict is exhausting. Because now, it's not just external judgment, it's internal doubt. And if you've ever felt like you don't even know how you come across anymore, that confusion didn't come from nowhere. But here's the shift that changes everything. They are not seeing you. They are seeing their interpretation of you, filtered through their experiences, their fears, their expectations, which means you were never fully in control of that perception to begin with. And if that feels frustrating, it should. Because you've been trying to fix something that was never yours to control. And the moment you realize that, something changes. Not outside, but inside. Because now the question is different. Not, how do I make them see me differently? But, why am I trying so hard to be seen correctly by people who already decided? And if you sit with that for a second, you'll feel it. That pressure starts to shift. Because maybe you don't need to explain yourself as much as you thought. And maybe you don't need to fight every wrong perception. Because the truth is, you will be misunderstood sometimes. No matter how clear you are, no matter how careful you are. And that's not a failure. It's a limitation of perception. But what you do with that, that's where your control actually is. And if you've been carrying the weight of trying to be perfectly understood, you already know how exhausting that can be. So what happens if you stop? What happens if you stop over-explaining? Stop adjusting every detail? Stop trying to fit into every expectation? At first, it feels uncomfortable because you're used to managing how you're perceived. But then something shifts. You feel lighter, less tense, more yourself. And people will still judge, that doesn't disappear. But your relationship with it changes. And if you've ever felt like you're constantly performing, this is where that performance starts to break. Because maybe the goal was never to control how people see you. Maybe the goal was to stop losing yourself in the process. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not reacting to judgment anymore. You're just existing, without filtering every word, without analyzing every reaction, without shrinking yourself to fit expectations. And if you've ever wondered what that would feel like, you're closer to it than you think. So if this felt familiar, if you've ever felt judged before even speaking, just know this. That version of you they created was never the full picture, and it never will be. Because people don't see everything. They see what they expect. And the moment you stop trying to control that, you stop being trapped by it. So maybe it was never about changing how they see you. Maybe it was about remembering who you are before they ever decided.